This is how my marriage fell apart. My wife, 30 female, was a teacher and we just started trying to conceive. She always wanted children since she was young, but she was extremely careful and responsible by waiting until 4 years into marriage to try. I, 29 male, was ready to be a parent. I grew up without my father, only an abusive stepdad. So it became a dream of mine to coach, mentor and love a child of my own, knowing we could become pregnant. We started working hard one evening. I was on the way home from a second part-time job that I hated when I stopped to get gas. My wife had left earlier that day to stay with her sister for a few days to comfort her over the passing of her old dog. When my bank card joint with my wife's name was declined, I checked the balance on my phone. There was a hold on the account from the Chattanooga hotel. That city in Tennessee was 75 miles from our home in Georgia. With that $200 hold, our available account balance was $0. Months prior, my wife maxed out our credit card to buy into some business proposition that she swore was going to make us money. Now stranded and furious without a way to get gas, I called my wife. She didn't answer right away. And when she did on the fourth call, she sounded irritated. I asked her why there was a hold on the account for a hotel and she stuttered, completely caught. She formulated a sentence that said her sister needed a getaway, some time away from home to grieve in luxury. I said, I knew that was nonsense because she wouldn't take her sister 75 miles away to do that. She freaked out and started breathing and praying quietly. She then asked me to forgive her. But before I could respond, I heard another man's voice say, "What are you doing? Hang up." Then the call ended. I was beside myself with worry and betrayal. I called her family and told them what was going on. Her sister was extremely upset too, even more upset because she used her as a cover-up lie. Her dog hadn't even passed away yet. She stayed on the phone with me, just assuring me about the future and that I could get through this with or without my wife. It was up to me. I had the strength to face this. When my wife returned hours later, I wanted her to explain herself. I had to know why she did this and how she even knew AP. She was extremely apologetic, saying she met him online and this was the first time they met in person. She said they went to the movies where AP lost his wallet. They went back for it, but they were closed. AP drove 7 hours to Chattanooga. So he needed her to reserve the hotel for them until he could pay for it with his wallet the next day. That's why the hold unexpectedly gave away her entire plan. She said she was glad I caught her because it was like a slap back to reality that stopped her from having sex with him. She was just trying to make it easier for me to forgive her and feel like nothing should stop us from continuing our marriage. I told her I couldn't believe a word that came out of her mouth and I would never trust her again. This went beyond sleeping with a stranger in a hotel. This was meeting, planning, talking, flirting, committing, scheming, and most importantly, still cheating on me. She took steps to make it happen to the point where it would be safer for me to assume she cheated. So I sent her away. She was completely shocked, like she really thought she could talk her way to forgiveness. She started crying, but I told her to stop because it would only waste precious time. I knew she wasn't the woman I should have children with. When I told her this, she dropped everything. She tried to reach for my hands. But I pulled away. I asked her why I would have children with a woman that lied to me and drove miles away to meet another man in a hotel room. She said, since nothing actually happened and she was remorseful, I should stay married to her and continue to trust her. That didn't make sense at all. From my betrayed perspective. She went to her sister's for real this time to live with her. Her sister was not happy. So their arrangement only lasted until she kicked her out. A few months after our divorce was final, I was able to prove in the courts what kind of woman my wife really was, the real whammy in all of this. That proves she would have continued. Her sneaky behavior is our phone records. I obtained them to show the court she was communicating with AP for a year and a half before they met in person. He wasn't the only person she communicated with, and she was actually getting paid by men online to send them nudes. It is still considered cheating even if she didn't sleep with anyone. Although I believe she did. She was talking to AP for so long before you even found out that the chances of her showing any restraint or remorse is slim. This man was in a relationship with her and would have continued speaking to her even if you didn't know about it. It's a much better option for your sanity in future to cut ties with the person that does this. There's no respect, consideration or love in her actions. You deserve better than this. And I'm glad you did the right thing by leaving her when we catch a spouse. After having no idea there was something going on. It can be hard to lay down the law and do what's right for yourself. Don't live in denial and try to trust an untrustworthy person. Just part ways, separate your lives again and find someone new after you do some personal healing and discovery. Thank you for sharing with us. Let's now get into our second story for today. My wife, 33 female and I 40 male, were married for 9 years before she cheated on me. She was really into flea marketing and collecting knick-knacks. We lived with my brother in his house, but she had an RV camper and a garden in the front yard that she decorated and cared for. Whenever we went on camping trips, we brought our dog. But my wife really wanted to own cows. They were her favorite animal and she was a farmer's daughter. While at a flea market one day, she met a man that owned several cow calves as it turned out. This man was at the flea market weekly just like her. They started setting up their tables side by side and I was happy for her. She made a friend who shared her interests and made her laugh. I didn't find it odd or worry about her cheating on me with this man. She took a selfie with him, Mike, and posted it on Instagram calling him a fellow junkie as a joke. He looked to be at least 10 years older than me. My wife and I met in college where I had to fight off other guys and our bond only became stronger in marriage. Her sister was cheated on by her husband. And whenever that happened, my wife talked about what a shame it is. Whenever someone cheats, she told me she was so thankful to have me as her husband and that she would never break my heart like that. They were together every Saturday morning. So they started having breakfast together and sharing more personal details. We had him over for dinner and he was a pretty likable guy. He actually came to a cookout that was technically a family reunion. So our whole family got to meet him. He started sharing tips and experiences with her father about his cows. Within a year, they became good friends. One summer, Mike invited my wife and me to camp on his mountain land. He was growing acres of oak trees to sell as his main source of income. So it was a great place to experience the outdoors. My wife insisted we go. So we took the RV camper and planned to stay for a week. I was a little nervous, but she convinced me it would turn out fine. She only wanted to take up his offer because he was lonely and needed friends. For 3 days. We had a great time meeting his cows, taking pictures, having cookouts, going fishing and having campfires. In the middle of the 4th night. Around 1 Amy sat straight up in bed when I couldn't feel my wife next to me. Since she wasn't in the camper, I went outside and called for her. I didn't hear anything. So I started walking toward Mike's cabin on the way. The outdoor showers were within eyesight and I caught a glimpse of a small light and what looked like the shape of bodies. I approached as quietly as I could until I could see what was happening. Mike was holding my wife against him in the shower, kissing her. Needless to say, they were both in their birthday suits. Just before I confronted them, I heard AP tell her he wanted to do it again. She excitedly agreed before I walked up to them and yelled, making them both jump and grab their towels. I asked what exactly they were going to do again. They stood there shamefully swearing a little. It only took my wife a few seconds to start crying. I could tell she just didn't expect me to catch her and she wished she could go back in time. AP stepped forward to apologize. He was an army vet. So I looked up to him and it was harder for me to feel real anger towards him. He said he interfered in our relationship and he'd never forgive himself. But he suggested that I forgive my wife because it was him who asked her to do what I asked. He couldn't look me in the eye. So I knew what happened. When I realized the truth, my wife cried harder, called my name and begged me to forgive her. It was so dramatic, and I hate drama. I remember feeling very numb before I found it possible to turn around, go back to the camper and get my phone. I called my brother and told him everything. He couldn't believe my wife did this to me. He drove through the middle of the night on a country road to come pick me up and take me home. It was an hour-and-a-half drive. So while I waited, my wife awkwardly begged me to forgive her and called back my brother to tell him I didn't need a ride. She tried offering any kind of deal to get me to forgive her, failing to notice that there wasn't a proper way to recover from infidelity. Once that decision is made, it can't be undone. My wife came to the house to get her stuff gradually. Over time, every time she came by, I had my brother talk to her if necessary because I couldn't stand her. It might have been a PS idea for them to do things. But she made the choice to leave the camper and get naked for him. This was still her fault because she clearly didn't respect or care about me as her husband. She had the nerve to say it shouldn't even count because it happened so fast and she was half asleep. That was one of the last things I ever heard her say. She continued living on a PS property. 2 years after our divorce, then AP decided to sell the majority of his acreage and force my ex to leave. She tried to ask her father permission to park her RV at his house, but he refused. He was extremely disappointed in her and AP and didn't want to have anything to do with them. They betrayed everything he believed in when it came to trust, family and relationships, since she didn't have anywhere else to park her RV. She now lives in a campground alone. What happened here was most definitely her fault, just as much as it was a PS. We don't really know who encouraged this affair to happen, but we can safely assume they both played a part because it wasn't forced. They were caught. So AP tried taking the blame, but that doesn't give him the right to pardon your wife's poor decision-making. If your wife truly wanted you to remain her husband, she never would have allowed herself to cheat on you. It doesn't sound like there was any problem in your marriage and nothing your wife would have wanted you to work on. She just gave in her primal urges to mate with a man that impressed her or bonded with her. A relationship never has to become sexual. She would have remained an honorable wife and maintained all her relationships as they were. But instead she took that step that the marriage couldn't recover from. What a terrible display of loyalty on her part. Thank you all for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also comment below with your thoughts on what happened.